It was 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday when Lieutenant General Marcus Reed stepped into Maple Street Coffee, dress blues crisp from a Pentagon briefing on readiness, chest glittering with Bronze Star, Purple Heart, combat awards. Every ribbon had been earned the hard way in Iraq and Afghanistan, paid for with blood, sand, and shattered bones. Reed approached the counter for his usual black coffee, a quiet ritual after decades in uniform. Behind him, Officer Darren Cole clocked the suspicious black man in a sharp military outfit and decided this was his moment to remind the cozy suburban crowd what real authority looked like, in his mind anyway. Cole had spent 10 years drifting between departments, always finding reasons black men needed to be stopped, searched, and put in their place. To him, the general's uniform was a costume, a lie begging to be exposed. This story might hit you hard. It might stick with you. If you believe truth wrapped in storytelling matters, hit subscribe before we go further. Let's make sure moments like this aren't forgotten. The coffee shop buzzed with its usual afternoon rhythm. Students hunched over laptops. Business people grabbed quick caffeine between meetings. Retirees lingered with newspapers, and the hiss of steaming milk mixed with low conversation and clinking ceramic mugs. Light jazz floated from overhead speakers, and the air smelled of roasted beans and sugary pastries. Maple Street Coffee prided itself on curated diversity, local art on the walls, playlists spanning cultures, a community values poster by the door. General Reed moved through that space with the quiet confidence of someone who had commanded brigades in life-or-death situations. At 56, his posture was straight, his stride measured, every movement reflecting years of discipline and responsibility. His uniform was immaculate, not a loose thread or smudge on his polished shoes. The ribbons told a story few civilians could grasp: multiple tours downrange, firefights, medevac birds, folded flags handed to families. That morning, he'd sat in one of the Pentagon's secure briefing rooms with the Joint Chiefs, dissecting troop readiness charts and strategic contingencies. The security of entire regions rode on those conversations and on his judgment. This coffee stop was his small slice of normal in a day dominated by classified folders and global stakes. "Good afternoon," he said to the young barista, a college kid with purple hair, nose ring, and warm, alert eyes. "Large black coffee, please." She smiled, picking up on the respect in his tone, on how he saw her as a person, not background scenery. "Coming right up, General. Thank you for your service," she said, genuinely meaning it. At a corner table, Officer Darren Cole polished off his fourth donut and wiped glaze from his fingers. At 38, his boyish face and soft jaw made him look younger, but the badge and gun gave him the swagger he craved. His decade in law enforcement was marked more by transfers than commendations. 3 departments, 3 counties, each departure just shy of disciplinary hearings. Nothing big enough for headlines, but enough to make supervisors quietly relieved when he left. Cole had issues with authority, especially authority that didn't look like him. To him, cops sat at the top of the pyramid, automatic respect, unquestioned compliance. He hadn't joined to serve. He'd joined to control. Over the years, he decided he had a talent for spotting trouble. In reality, his radar only pinged when black men drove nice cars, wore expensive suits, or simply walked confidently through spaces he thought weren't meant for them. Today, watching Reed at the counter, every warped instinct flared. A black man in what looked like an elaborate uniform? Obviously a stunt. Cole was sure he was watching someone fishing for discounts or free coffee by faking military service. The uniform looked real enough, Cole grudgingly admitted. But people ordered everything online now, the medals gleaming on Reed's chest. Probably props from the same website, he thought, rolling his eyes as the barista thanked the general again. Cole had watched stolen valor clips on the internet, seen people exposed in parking lots and shopping centers. In his mind, this was another one, someone gaming America's reverence for the military, especially in a patriotic little town like this. Reed paid with a crisp 20, told the barista to keep the change. She lit up at the tip. He answered with a small, easy smile, then turned, scanning for an open seat where he could review notes in relative peace. He spotted an empty table by the window, laid down a leather portfolio, and pulled out briefing documents. He planned to skim logistics for upcoming troop rotations while savoring 10 uninterrupted minutes with his coffee. Cole watched, irritation rising. The generous tip felt like a performance, a way to draw all eyes to the uniform, to soak up admiration from staff and customers. The general's calm self-assurance only deepened Cole's suspicion. The veterans Cole knew from his small hometown, at least in his mind, were quiet, withdrawn, almost apologetic about their service. They didn't stroll into coffee shops and dress blues. They didn't command rooms just by existing in them. As Reed opened his portfolio and began reading, Cole made up his mind. This, he decided, was his opportunity to show everyone what real police work looked like. He'd expose the fraud right there in front of the crowd. He rose from his chair, adjusted his duty belt, and tugged his shirt so the badge and nameplate sat perfectly visible. Then he started toward Reed with the heavy, deliberate walk he'd practiced. Part intimidation, part theater, all ego. Conversations faded. Laptops were lowered. People sensed something breaking the easy atmosphere. "Excuse me," Cole said, using the same commanding tone he reserved for traffic stops. "I'm going to need to see some identification." Reed looked up from his documents, expression calm, a hint of confusion in his eyes. Moments ago, he'd been thinking about artillery readiness and rail transport capacity in Eastern Europe. Now he was staring at a local patrol officer. Something in Cole's voice, sharp, eager, aggressive, told Reed this wasn't a casual question. "Is there a problem, officer?" Reed asked evenly, glancing at the name tag. "Officer Cole." His tone stayed respectful, but there was an edge of alertness. Cole felt a surge of satisfaction. The faker already looked cautious, he told himself. "Good. I said I need to see some identification," Cole repeated. "And I'm going to need you to explain why you're wearing that military uniform." The shop fell quiet. Students paused their typing. Business calls were muted, and an elderly couple in the corner set their newspaper down. The room collectively leaned in, all eyes drifting to the man in blue and the man in green. Reed calmly reached into his jacket and produced his military ID, handing it over with practiced ease, the same way he'd passed Pentagon security that morning. "I'm wearing it because I'm an active duty Army officer, General Marcus Reed," he said, "currently assigned to the Pentagon." "Is there something specific you need, Officer Cole?" Reed's tone was measured, level, more patient than annoyed, but his eyes were locked on Cole's, gauging intent, threat, and motive in seconds. Cole examined the ID with exaggerated thoroughness, tilting it toward the light, comparing the photo to Reed's face, running a thumb over the edges, like a man auditioning for a training video. It looked real, frustratingly real. "Marcus Reed," Cole read, stretching the name out, letting disbelief drip from every syllable. "Says here you're a general. That's convenient." He lifted his gaze and smirked. "You know, impersonating a military officer is a federal crime, right?" Reed stayed seated, hands folded loosely on the table. 25 years in uniform had given him a sixth sense for disrespect, especially the kind wrapped in smug certainty. This wasn't a routine ID check. This was something uglier. "Officer Cole," Reed said, voice still calm but firmer now, "that identification is legitimate, as is my commission. I spent this morning in secure briefings at the Pentagon. Unless you have a specific legal reason, I'd like to finish my coffee." Cole felt his ears burn. The man in cuffs that ought to be didn't just refuse to grovel. He was speaking to a police officer like an equal, even hinting that the officer back off. To Cole, that was unforgivable defiance. "Sir, I'm going to need you to stand up and step outside with me," Cole said, hand drifting toward his handcuffs. "We'll sort this out properly." Around them, phones quietly appeared in hands, lenses angling toward the unfolding scene. A young woman in yoga pants opened her camera app. A teenager near the door started an Instagram live. At a corner table, an elderly man in a navy blazer with a Marine Corps pin watched with narrowing eyes, recognition flickering there. Reed rose slowly, his full height and bearing snapping fully into view. At 6'3" with a spine straight as a flagpole, he was every inch the senior officer. Metal ribbons caught the sunlight, glinting like small, defiant truths. Officer Cole, Reed said, voice carrying easily through the shop now. I am Lieutenant General Marcus Reed of the United States Army. I've presented genuine credentials that can be verified in any official military database. What's your specific complaint? Cole felt control slipping. The fraud wasn't crumbling. Instead, he was making Cole look like the one under questioning. Rage and embarrassment tangled together. Cole clung to the only thing he trusted, his badge, his version of authority. My complaint, Cole announced loudly, making sure the room heard every syllable, is that I believe you're wearing a costume. I believe those medals are fake. I think you're impersonating an officer for special treatment, and you're about to be arrested. Whispers rushed through the shop. Phones were now openly raised. No more pretense. The teenager adjusted his angle to capture both men. The barista's face crumpled, torn between the polite man who tipped her and the uniform with a gun. The older man with the Marine pin, retired Marine Captain Alan Park, 81 years old, stood slowly, joints stiff, but eyes sharp. He stepped closer, decades of experience in combat boots, lending a quiet weight to every movement. Son, Park said to Cole, voice steady, the kind that had once barked orders over artillery fire. That's a legitimate uniform with real decorations. I've seen dress blues longer than you've been alive. That man's the real thing. Cole snapped toward him. Sir, this is police business. I need you to step back and let me handle it. Park didn't move. What I see is a cop harassing a U.S. general because of prejudice and ignorance, he replied. That's what dishonors uniforms. Reed watched, worry flickering. Not for himself, but for the older Marine now standing between an armed officer and a bad decision. Situations like this could spiral fast, especially with ego involved and cameras rolling. Captain Park, Reed said, having clocked the pin and posture. I appreciate your support, sir, but please let me handle this. Then he turned back to Cole. Officer, again, what specific crime do you believe I'm committing? Cole looked around, seeing cameras, hearing the low disapproval rising in the room. Instead of backing down, his fear of humiliation hardened into fury. In his mind, this wasn't about truth anymore. It was about who would win. You're under arrest, Cole declared, voice ringing through the cafe. Impersonating a federal officer, fraud, and resisting. The gasps were audible. Several customers started filming more deliberately, framing shots like they knew news would want them. The barista's eyes filled with tears. The older couple whispered urgently about calling someone, military police maybe or a lawyer, but had no idea where to start. Reed lifted his hands slightly, palms open, showing no threat, only controlled compliance. His training emphasized de-escalation when possible, but it also taught recognition. Sometimes the safest move was to cooperate, let the system record its own mistakes, and address the fallout later with lawyers and commanders present. Officer Cole, Reed said clearly, voice carrying across the silent shop, I am complying under protest. I am Lieutenant General Marcus Reed, United States Army, service number 308K47261, currently assigned to the Pentagon under General Robert Hayes, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. My identification is genuine and verifiable through the Department of Defense database. I am a decorated combat veteran being detained without evidence of any crime. Cole stepped in, snapped the cuffs on tighter than necessary, savoring the small win. You can say whatever you want, Cole muttered. Right now you're going to shut up and walk to the car like every other criminal. He tugged Reed toward the door, petty dominance disguised as procedure. Park stepped forward again. Officer, I'm telling you, you're making a terrible mistake. That man is exactly who he says he is. You're about to start something a lot bigger than you understand. Cole whipped around. Old man, back off or you'll be riding in the back seat with him, he snapped. Park didn't budge. I fought in Korea before your parents met. I know soldiers. That one's real. You stop this before you wreck everything. Outside, the arrest drew attention. People on the sidewalk stopped, watching a handcuffed man in formal army dress being led to a patrol car. Phones went up. A couple of onlookers started calling friends, words like general and arrested slipping out. Reed walked with quiet dignity, even in cuffs. He knew everything was being recorded, from body cams to cell phones. That was some comfort. Eventually, someone with rank and jurisdiction would see this and start asking hard questions. At the car, Cole opened the rear door, placed a hand on Reed's head. Standard protocol, but with a deliberate shove. "Watch your head," he said, fake concern barely covering his eagerness. Reed felt the extra pressure but didn't react. The door slammed. Outside, more photos, more video. Within minutes, clips would hit social media. Within an hour, local news. By nightfall, people with stars on their shoulders and offices in Washington would be fielding questions. In the back seat, Reed closed his eyes and began slow, measured breathing. He mentally arranged the calls he'd need to make. Pentagon duty officer, his aide, his wife, and the official statements that would inevitably follow. Cole slid into the driver's seat, keyed the radio. "Dispatch, Unit 12, he said, energy in his voice. "One male, mid-50s, under arrest for impersonating a federal officer and fraud. Suspect in full fake dress uniform, seeking special treatment." The dispatcher responded, professional but neutral. "Copy, Unit 12. Any additional units needed?" Cole checked the rearview mirror. Reed sat calmly, hands cuffed, gaze steady. "Negative," Cole said. "Suspect is secured and compliant. Routine booking." Cole didn't realize every word on that radio was recorded, or that those recordings would soon be replayed in conference rooms, courtrooms, and congressional offices. He was already picturing himself as the cop who caught the fraud. In the back, Reed continued breathing evenly, running through contingency plans. The moment he had access to a phone, the Pentagon's machinery would start turning. This was humiliating, but not hopeless. Facts were on his side. He thought of his wife, Lena, imagining her seeing some grainy cell phone video before he had the chance to call. He thought of his soldiers who expected leadership that could navigate civilian systems without creating crises. And he thought of the barista who had simply offered kindness and respect to a stranger in uniform, now watching that moment twist into something surreal and frightening right in front of her. The municipal station came into view. A single-story brick building with narrow windows, an unremarkable structure that could house anything from a licensing office to a tax bureau. Today, it was about to step onto a national stage. Cole pulled into a spot by the side entrance, the one that led straight to the booking area, where he could make his entrance with maximum audience. The car idled a moment as he savored the image of himself bringing in the fake general. "End of the line," he said, shutting off the engine. Time to face reality. He rounded to the back passenger door, waiting just a beat longer than necessary, giving any watching officers time to notice the dressed-up prisoner. "Let's go," Cole said, yanking the door open. "Any sudden moves and I'm adding assault on an officer." Reed stepped out as smoothly as the cuffs allowed, shoulders squared, chin level. Even under arrest, his bearing never wavered. Cole kept a firm grip on Reed's arm, less for safety than for show. The automatic doors slid open, revealing fluorescent lights, beige flooring, and a cluster of desks and counters where officers and civilian staff handled daily intake. The booking area quieted. Arrests were common. Men in full dress uniform were not. Heads turned. A couple of officers froze mid-conversation. One civilian clerk set down a stack of forms, staring openly at the medals on Reed's chest. Sergeant Lena Morales, a 22-year veteran working the booking desk, looked up. She'd processed thousands of people through those doors. In seconds, she could usually distinguish between hardened criminals, scared kids, and people who absolutely didn't belong there. "What have we got, Cole?" Morales asked, skepticism already touching her tone. Cole straightened. "Major fraud," he said proudly. "Subject impersonating a military officer. Fake uniform, fake medals, trying to score special treatment at a coffee shop. Morales studied Reed, uniform, posture, the way he held himself. She'd seen her share of bogus military costumes. This didn't look like one. The details were too perfect, the tailoring too precise, the weight of the moment too heavy. "You verify his ID?" she asked. Cole waved a hand. "Had a fake, too. High-quality forgery, but clearly bogus. There's no way this guy is actually military, much less a general." Reed spoke, voice still professional despite the strain. "Sergeant Morales, my name is Lieutenant General Marcus Reed, United States Army, service number 3 47261. My ID is legitimate and verifiable through the Department of Defense personnel system. I respectfully request you contact the Pentagon duty officer to confirm my identity before processing any booking." The request was calm, direct, exactly what someone who had done this dance with bureaucracy for decades would say. Morales looked between Reed and Cole. Her instincts screamed that something was deeply wrong. The man in cuffs spoke like a seasoned officer, not a con artist. His uniform didn't just look real. It radiated the gravity of earned honor. "Cole," she said slowly, "maybe we make that call before we go further. Takes 5 minutes. If he's lying, we'll know. If he's not—" She let the implication hang in the air between them. Cole flushed. He'd expected admiration, not doubt. To him, Morales' suggestion felt like betrayal. "Sergeant, I know a fraud when I see one," he snapped. "This is a costume. Those decorations are bogus, and I'm not wasting time chasing his story." Around them, officers were drifting closer. The sight of a cuffed man in dress blues arguing about his rank with a patrol cop drew interest like a magnet. A few staffers lifted phones, pretending to check messages while quietly recording. Officer Kelly Tran, a rookie barely a year into the job, stepped up beside Morales. She'd spent nights studying military insignia for a cultural sensitivity workshop. She recognized combat valor ribbons and campaign medals on Reed's chest instantly. "Sergeant," Tran said quietly, "some of those ribbons, those are for combat heroism. You can't just buy them off the internet. We should really double-check before we book him." Cole spun on her. "Tran, this is not your case. You don't undermine another officer on the floor. I made the arrest, and I'm telling you he's lying. We're booking him, fingerprinting him, and charging accordingly." Reed watched, concern deepening. Again, less for himself than for the officers trying to do the right thing while being steamrolled by ego. "Officer Cole," he said, voice gaining steel, "as a general in the United States Army, I am ordering you to contact the Pentagon and verify my identity. You are making a mistake with consequences far beyond this building." Cole barked a laugh, sharp and derisive. "You're giving orders? You're in handcuffs, pal. You don't outrank anyone in here. And every time you repeat that story, you dig deeper." The booking room was almost fully focused on them now. Desks were abandoned, keyboards quiet. Even civilian staff hovered near doorways, sensing they were watching something that wouldn't stay contained within four walls. The station's chief, Denise Carter, nearly 32 years in law enforcement, stepped out of her office. Emerging from budget spreadsheets into chaos, she scanned the scene. Furious patrol officer, cuffed man in immaculate uniform, tense sergeant, nervous rookie. "What's going on?" Chief Carter asked, voice cutting through the murmur. Cole straightened. "Chief, major fraud arrest. Subjects impersonating a military officer. Fake uniform, fake medals, trying to hustle local businesses. When I confronted him, he escalated and became deceptive." Carter turned to Reed, taking in the details. She'd seen stolen valor cases before. The fakes always felt slightly off. Wrong boots, sloppy ribbon bars, inconsistent stories. This man radiated the calm precision of someone long accustomed to real authority. "Officer Cole," she said carefully, "did you verify his credentials before making the arrest?" Cole bristled. "His ID is fake, Chief. Slick, but fake. I used my training to determine the uniform and decorations aren't legitimate issue." Carter faced Reed. "Sir, for the record, State your name and unit. Reed drew himself up as much as the cuffs allowed. Lieutenant General Marcus Reed, United States Army, currently assigned to the Pentagon under General Robert Hayes, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Service number 38K47261. I respectfully request you call the Pentagon duty officer at area code 703, number 5713381, to verify my identity and assignment. The phone number, delivered without hesitation, sent a chill through the room. Fraudsters avoided specifics. Real officers lived in specifics. Carter knew that. Cole, she said, voice tightening, remove the cuffs and step away from the general. Cole stared at her, stunned. Chief, he's playing you. This is his act. Carter's tone sharpened. That was not a suggestion, officer. Remove the handcuffs, now. Sergeant Morales, make that call. Morales was already reaching for the phone. Cole tried again, desperate. Chief, if we chase every story criminals spin... But Morales had dialed. The conversation with the duty officer was short, formal, and devastating. Within moments, it was clear Lieutenant General Marcus Reed was exactly who he claimed to be, expected back at his Pentagon office soon. Morales hung up and faced the room. The duty officer confirms he's currently assigned to the Pentagon and was in meetings all morning, she said. They want to speak with whoever's in charge here immediately. Silence crashed over the booking area. Every officer felt it. That sick drop in the gut when a mistake crosses from unfortunate to catastrophic. Cole's face drained of color. His hands trembled slightly. The narrative in his head cracked under the weight of reality. Chief Carter took the phone, stepping aside as she began what would be the first of many painful conversations with increasingly senior Pentagon officials. As she spoke, Cole sagged against the desk, realizing his career had just imploded. Reed stood tall, despite sore wrists and public humiliation. He knew vindication would come. The facts were ironclad. But he also knew reputational damage traveled faster than truth, and this episode would echo for a long time. Outside, the first news van rolled into the parking lot. Camera crews spilled out, scanning for angles, microphones ready. A handful of bystanders pointed toward the entrance, already rehearsing how they'd describe what they'd witnessed. At the Pentagon, Colonel Alicia Grant, Reed's aide and liaison, was reviewing intelligence briefs when her secure line rang with the urgent tone reserved for high-priority calls from the duty desk. She answered, pen already in hand. Colonel Grant, we have a situation involving General Reed, Staff Sergeant Rivera said, voice unusually tight. He was arrested about 30 minutes ago by local police while in full dress uniform. The officer claims he's impersonating a military officer. Grant's stomach lurched. In 15 years, she'd handled congressional requests, classified crises, and delicate diplomatic flare-ups, but never something like this. A 3-star general arrested for impersonating himself. It sounded absurd until it didn't. Repeat that, she said, already reaching for a notepad. Yes, ma'am, Rivera replied. Arrested at a coffee shop in Virginia by Officer Darren Cole of the Municipal Department. The officer insists the general's uniform and credentials are fake. He's currently at the local station. The chief has requested verification of his identity and status. Grant rose, grabbing her jacket and a folder already full of relevant files. Her brain was spinning through protocols, media strategy, legal angles. Has General Hayes been notified? She asked, referring to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. Not yet, ma'am. We wanted confirmed details first. Grant didn't hesitate. Notify his office immediately. Code red incident involving General Reed. Loop in Pentagon Legal. This is classified for now. She hung up and dialed another memorized number. Within moments, she was speaking to Reed's wife, Lena. Lena, it's Alicia. I need you to sit down. Marcus is safe, but he's been arrested by local police. It's a misunderstanding. We're moving fast. The conversation was short and painful. Grant could hear shock, disbelief, and anger fighting for space in Lena's voice. The idea that her husband, a decorated war hero, could be hauled off in cuffs while wearing his own uniform felt surreal. 3 floors up, General Robert Hayes was wrapping up a secure briefing on global posture when his aide knocked, expression grave. He stepped into the hall, leaving maps and threat assessments behind for a problem no chart could explain. "Sir, urgent situation involving General Reed," Lieutenant Colonel Dana Cho said. "Colonel Grant is en route to brief you, but you should know. Reed's been arrested by civilian police." Hayes's expression shifted from confusion to anger in seconds. Reed wasn't just a trusted subordinate, he was a friend and one of the most capable officers Hayes had ever commanded. The idea of Reed as a criminal didn't just seem unlikely, it was, to Hayes, flatly impossible. "Arrested for what?" Hayes demanded. "Preliminary report says impersonating a military officer while in dress uniform," Cho replied. Hayes stared, incredulous. "Let me be clear. A serving 3-star general was arrested for pretending to be a 3-star general?" "Yes, sir, that's what we're seeing." The implications hammered home. This wasn't just about one officer. It was about the relationship between the military and local law enforcement, about respect, bias, and the boundaries of authority. "Emergency meeting in the tank, 15 minutes, Hayes ordered, naming the Pentagon's most secure conference room. "I want the Secretary of Defense, Army Chief of Staff, Pentagon Legal, Public Affairs, and FBI liaison in the room." 15 minutes later, the tank filled with some of the most powerful figures in the national security apparatus. Secretary of Defense Elaine Porter, Army Chief General Karen Douglas, Legal Counsel Colonel Sean Ramirez, Admiral Lisa Monroe from Public Affairs, and FBI Liaison Director Mark Lewis. Hayes didn't waste time. "We have a crisis that cuts to the core of civilian-military relations," he began. "One of our serving generals has been arrested by local police for the crime of wearing his own uniform." Porter, a former senator only 6 months into the secretary job, looked around the table, concern etched into her features. "General Hayes, give us everything we know," she said. Hayes nodded to Grant, who opened her briefing folder. "At approximately 14 to 47 hours, Grant began, Lieutenant General Reed was arrested at a local coffee shop by Officer Darren Cole of the Municipal Police. Reed was wearing his dress blues and conducting personal business at the time. Officer Cole claims Reed is impersonating a military officer and that both his uniform and credentials are fraudulent." Admiral Monroe raised a hand. "Do we have confirmation this has already hit social media?" Grant nodded grimly. "Multiple civilian videos are online. At least 3 clips show the arrest clearly. Engagement is climbing fast. We expect national media coverage within the hour." Porter rubbed her temples, calculating political fallout. "What's our legal footing?" she asked. "Can civilian police arrest a serving general?" Colonel Ramirez answered. "Technically, yes, ma'am. Military officers are subject to civilian law off base, but there must be probable cause of an actual crime, which appears absent here." FBI liaison. Mark Lewis leaned forward. "From a federal perspective, this looks like false arrest at minimum, possibly a civil rights violation if bias motivated the stop. If race is a factor, hate crime enhancements are on the table." General Douglas, Army Chief of Staff, had stayed quiet until now, jaw clenched. "This is bigger than one arrest," she said. "If we let this stand, we're signaling that any cop can cuff any officer based purely on prejudice and ignorance." Hayes nodded. "Exactly. This demands a response that makes clear. Harassment of military personnel will not be tolerated. Full stop." Porter scanned the room, weighing options against headlines she knew were already being drafted. "Recommendations?" she asked. Hayes was ready. "Immediate deployment of federal resources to secure Reed's release and open a comprehensive investigation into Officer Cole and his department. We also need new protocols to protect service members in similar encounters." Lewis checked his phone, which kept buzzing on the table. Hashtag Respect Our Generals is already trending, he reported. Tens of thousands of posts in under an hour. Narrative is forming without us. Admiral Monroe frowned. "If we don't get ahead of this, it becomes the story. It'll overshadow everything else we're trying to communicate about readiness and global posture. Porter made the call. Director Lewis, I want an FBI team at that station immediately. Get Reed released and start a full investigation into how this happened. General Hayes, call the governor. Make sure he understands how serious this is. Hayes stood. Yes, ma'am, and let me be clear. Reed isn't just a victim here. He's a symbol of what our military represents. How we react will tell every service member whether we truly have their backs. The meeting broke, each person leaving with an acute sense that this wasn't just a local policing error. It was a national test of respect, authority, and accountability that would be watched from barracks, squad cars, and state houses alike. Grant returned to her office to a phone that wouldn't stop ringing. Reporters, congressional staff, military families, commanders from across branches. The story was racing ahead of any formal statements. The demand for answers grew by the minute. Across the country, in squad rooms and chow halls, the same question echoed. If a decorated general could be cuffed for wearing his own uniform, what did that say about how America valued its military? At FBI headquarters, Mark Lewis had been with the Bureau 12 years, but he'd never taken a call quite like the one at 3:23 p.m. from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs himself, voice controlled but unmistakably furious. Director Lewis, this is General Hayes. I need a federal response team at the municipal station immediately. One of my generals is being unlawfully detained. I want this resolved within the hour, Hayes said. No room for debate. Lewis had worked joint cases before, but the anger humming beneath Hayes's words told him this wasn't routine liaison work. Careers and perhaps interagency relationships were hanging on how quickly and firmly he responded. Yes, General, Lewis said. What level of authority are we operating under? Hayes didn't hesitate. Understand something clearly. Reed is tied to some of the most sensitive planning in our entire defense posture. His detention is a potential national security issue. You have full federal authority to resolve this by any lawful means necessary, Hayes finished. Lewis hung up and moved fast, assembling a 6-agent team, arranging helicopter transport to cut travel time, and coordinating with the local field office for ground support. This wasn't just intervention, it was a message being written in real time. Meanwhile, at the small municipal station, Chief Carter was starting to grasp just how big a storm was headed her way. Pentagon officials had been followed by calls from the governor's office, then congressional staffers, then reporters whose questions were sharper than anything she'd been briefed on. Her quiet department had become the center of a political earthquake. From her office window, she watched Reed, still cuffed to a bench, still composed. Cole sat nearby, scribbling on paperwork, as if writing the report could somehow make his version of reality stick. Cole, Carter called, voice echoing. My office, now. He walked in, expecting praise, chest tight with anticipation. Chief, I've nearly finished the report. This was a sophisticated scam, but I saw through it. This could put us on the map. Carter stared at him. I just got off the phone with the Pentagon, she said evenly. The man you arrested is Lieutenant General Marcus Reed, a serving 3-star in the United States Army. Cole blinked, then laughed weakly. Chief, that's impossible. I know a fake when I see one. That general thing is part of the con. They're fooled by his paperwork. I wasn't. Carter's patience snapped. I've been a cop for 3 decades, she said. I know mistakes when I see them. You didn't just misread a situation. You put handcuffs on a real general on camera and dragged this whole department into it. A knock at the door. Morales stepped in. Chief, we've got federal agents at the entrance, she said. They're asking to see you immediately. Carter checked the clock. Less than 2 hours from arrest to full federal response. That speed told her everything. Cole, you're suspended pending investigation, she said. Hand over your badge and weapon. His face went sheet white. Chief, I made a solid arrest. You can't. Badge and weapon, she repeated, holding out her hand. After a tense beat, he surrendered them. Carter straightened her uniform, took a steadying breath, and walked toward the front entrance, bracing for the hardest conversation of her career. Two black SUVs rolled to a stop out front, drawing cameras and whispers. Lewis and his agent stepped out, moving with the calm assurance of people who carried federal authority and knew they were fully backed by the Pentagon. Lewis approached the doors. Carter met him halfway, expression a mix of dread and determination. "Chief Carter," he said, flashing credentials. "Mark Lewis, FBI. We're here regarding the detention of Lieutenant General Marcus Reed." "Agent Lewis," she replied. "We're cooperating fully. The general is unharmed. We're prepared to release him immediately." Lewis studied her face. He saw someone who understood the gravity of what had happened and was trying to contain the fallout. "I need to see him now," Lewis said. "We'll also be interviewing the arresting officer and reviewing every document and recording related to this incident." Carter nodded. "This way," she said, leading them through the station. As they entered the booking area, conversation died. Reed sat chained to the bench, posture unbroken, uniform flawless even after hours of wear. His eyes tracked the agent's arrival with practiced calm, but the lines around them were deeper now. Officers stepped aside as Lewis approached, the weight of FBI and Pentagon scrutiny settling over the room like a physical presence. It was clear to everyone watching that this moment would be remembered for a very long time. "General Reed," Lewis said, voice respectful. "I'm Special Agent Mark Lewis with the FBI. We're here to secure your release and begin an investigation into the circumstances of your arrest." Reed nodded once. "Appreciated, Agent Lewis," he replied. "I trust we'll be documenting everything thoroughly." His tone was steady, but beneath it lay a promise that this wouldn't end with one pair of cuffs being removed. Around them, officers shifted uneasily. Some thought of the moment they'd first seen the uniform and doubted Cole's story, but hadn't spoken up. Others replayed their own assumptions about who belonged where and at what cost. As Lewis signaled for the cuffs to be removed, cameras, official and unofficial, captured every second. In that fluorescent-lit room, under the watchful eyes of federal agents and shaken officers, a line was being drawn about respect, power, and accountability. And though the immediate crisis was beginning to unwind inside that station, everyone there understood the real battle over trust, bias, and the treatment of those who serve was only just getting started. The clash between Reed's unmistakable command presence and the humiliating reality of sitting cuffed on a bench hit the FBI team immediately, hard and sharp. "General Reed," said the lead agent, stepping forward. "Special Agent Mark Lewis, FBI. I'm here under direct orders from the Pentagon to secure your immediate release, sir." Reed lifted his gaze to Lewis, relief flickering behind his steady eyes. He'd expected federal involvement eventually, but even he was surprised by how fast Washington had moved. These agents weren't just his personal lifeline. They were the visible weight of federal authority pushing down on a local department that had lost its way. "Agent Lewis, thank you for coming so quickly," Reed said. "I assume you'll want a full account of what led to this arrest." Lewis nodded to one of his partners, who moved instantly to unlock the cuffs. "We'll take a complete statement, General. First priority is getting you released and checking your condition." The metal clicked open. Reed rose, slowly straightening his back and shoulders. With his wrists free, the shift was immediate, from detainee to senior commander, reasserting full authority. Chief Carter watched the transformation with a growing knot in her stomach, realizing she was witnessing the opening scene of a federal investigation that could end multiple careers, including her own. FBI agents in her station meant something every chief dreaded: outside scrutiny, national press, and the real possibility of criminal exposure for failures they'd long convinced themselves were administrative. "Agent Lewis," Carter said carefully, "the arresting officer is available for interview. I've already suspended him pending investigation and removed his badge and weapon." Lewis gave a curt nod. "I'll speak with him soon. But before that, I need to understand how your procedures allowed this to happen after the general presented valid credentials." Before Carter could answer, another agent stepped up beside Lewis. "Sir, we're getting confirmation that video of the arrest has gone viral. Hashtag Respect Our Generals is trending nationwide. Media requests are exploding." Lewis closed his eyes for a beat, understanding exactly what that meant. This was no longer a local embarrassment. This was now a full-blown national story with millions already watching. Every move from this point forward, every word spoken in this building, would be replayed, dissected, and judged by an angry public and a very interested Pentagon. General Reed, Lewis said, turning back, we need to get you out of this building immediately. There's a crowd and multiple news crews outside. This is now headline material. Reed nodded. Understood, Agent Lewis. I'm prepared to make a statement when appropriate, but it needs to be coordinated with Pentagon Public Affairs. This can't be handled piecemeal. As Lewis's team formed a protective escort around Reed, Officer Darren Cole appeared in the doorway, called up for questioning, expression still defiant, confusion battling entitlement in his eyes. Agent Lewis, Cole announced, walking toward them with his old swagger poorly adapted to a suspended officer's empty belt. I'm the one who made this arrest. You should hear my side. This individual, Cole continued, jerking his chin toward Reed, was attempting to scam civilians by pretending to be a general. I've got documentation showing those credentials, and medals are bogus. Lewis regarded Cole with the cool stare federal agents reserve for people who have just made their jobs dramatically easier. Officer Cole, you're telling me General Reed was impersonating General Reed? A flicker of doubt crossed Cole's face, but he pressed forward. Agent, I understand he's somehow fooled Pentagon officials, but based on my training, he's a fake. Costume, fake medals, forged ID, obvious. Reed watched the exchange with a mix of professional curiosity and disbelief. Even now, with federal agents present and verification in hand, Cole was clinging to his version of reality. Lewis made a decision that would effectively close the door on Cole's law enforcement career and possibly his freedom. Officer Cole, you are now under federal investigation for civil rights violations, false arrest, and potential hate crimes. You have the right to remain silent, Lewis added, voice flat. And if you have any sense of self-preservation left, I strongly recommend you use that right starting now. The room went deathly quiet. Everyone understood they just watched the moment Cole's world collapse. Color drained from his face, hands trembling as he looked for someone to save him. Chief Carter stepped forward. Agent Lewis, Officer Cole is suspended and will cooperate fully with your investigation. Our department is committed to making sure nothing like this ever happens again. Lewis nodded once, but his expression said plainly that promises and regrets wouldn't shield anyone from consequences. Chief, we'll be conducting a full review of your policies and command decisions as well. We'll also be pulling Cole's complete employment history from this department and every previous one. Anyone who helped him keep that badge will be part of this conversation. As agents guided Reed toward the exit, Lewis paused and looked back at Carter. Chief, this incident has already reached the highest levels of government. The response will match the magnitude of what happened here today. Outside, satellite trucks jammed the street, camera tripods sprouted on sidewalks, and reporters rehearsed their live intros. A three-star general handcuffed in uniform was the kind of story that dominated entire news cycles. Reed stepped through the doors, flanked by FBI agents, posture impeccable, uniform flawless despite hours of humiliation. His authority wasn't just restored, it was now amplified by the federal shield surrounding him. As he headed toward the waiting FBI SUVs, he caught sight of microphones being readied, red tally lights blinking on cameras, and reporters jockeying for position to capture his first public appearance post-release. The last image Cole saw before being led away for questioning was Reed walking free, treated with the deference Cole had denied him. Reality finally started cracking through his stubborn narrative. For the first time, Cole began to understand the scale of what he'd done, and that this wouldn't be fixed with a strongly worded report or a quiet transfer out of town. The machinery of federal justice was already rolling forward, and he was about to learn, in the harshest way possible, what it cost to target a U.S. general. At the local FBI field office, Agent Lewis had seen enough misconduct cases to recognize when they were dealing with more than a one-off bad decision. Cole's file screamed something uglier. As Lewis sifted through personnel records, what emerged wasn't a picture of a decent cop who'd snapped under pressure, but of a man carefully protected by a system allergic to accountability. Cole's career looked like a dotted line of red flags. 3 departments in 10 years, each departure just ahead of formal misconduct hearings that somehow never quite materialized. Citizen complaints buried in bureaucracy, witnesses discouraged from testifying, and supervisors choosing public image over painful truth. Lewis could trace institutional failure like a pattern on a map. Martinez, Lewis called to his partner, Agent Carla Martinez, who was cataloging videos from the coffee shop. Check this record out. Riverside PD, then County Metro, then this department. 2 excessive force complaints at Riverside before he resigned, 3 more at County Metro. Every time, he's allowed to walk quietly instead of facing discipline. Same script, different patch. Martinez looked up from her screen, where she'd been freezing frames of Cole shoving cuffs on Reed. Classic pattern, she said. Problem officer gets passed around instead of removed. What kind of complaints? Lewis turned pages, jaw tightening. Excessive force on traffic stops, baseless searches, arrests without probable cause. Nearly all complainants are black men, teenagers to older veterans. He clearly has a type. Within hours, the investigation had outgrown a single arrest. What began with Reed's humiliation had become a deep dive into years of civil rights abuses shielded by different badges and letterheads. Martinez pulled up a flagged case from Riverside. This one stands out, she said. In 2018, Cole arrested a black trauma surgeon leaving the hospital after emergency surgery. Claimed he looked suspicious in scrubs at 2 a.m. Lewis shook his head. Let me guess. Complaint filed. Thorough. Internal review. 0 discipline. No attempt to check his story? Exactly, Martinez replied. Investigation closed. They never pulled hospital security footage, never talked to staff, never even verified the doctor's employment. Case file might as well be labeled "Cover Our Backs." As Lewis and his team contacted Cole's prior victims, a painful pattern emerged. Credentialed professionals, exhausted parents, community leaders, all arrested or harassed for the same unspoken offense, existing while black in spaces Cole didn't like. Dr. Leonard Price, the surgeon from that 2018 incident, agreed to speak with investigators. His voice over the line carried the weight of someone who'd waited years to see anyone take this seriously. Agent Lewis, I've been waiting 4 years for this call, Dr. Price said. Cole arrested me for nothing except being a black man in scrubs outside my own hospital. He cuffed me in front of nurses, patients, families. My reputation cratered overnight. People whispered. Some refused to let me operate. I almost walked away from medicine entirely. The parallels to Reed's experience were chilling. Respected black professionals, credentials in hand, treated as criminals while their legitimacy was dismissed or ignored by officers convinced of their own infallible instincts. Did anything happen to Cole afterward? Lewis asked. Any discipline? Training? Internal review, Price replied flatly. 3 months later, they said his actions were within policy. They never interviewed witnesses, never watched security footage, never once called hospital administration. Interview after interview told the same story. Cole hadn't just slipped through cracks. Entire departments had paved him a smooth path forward, choosing convenience over confronting their own rot. Another victim, high school teacher Angela Ruiz, had been arrested during a peaceful student demonstration in 2020. Her crime was standing between her students and Cole's escalating temper. He told me people like me were the problem, Ruiz said, that if we taught our kids to obey police without question, fewer of them would end up dead. He arrested me in front of my students specifically to make an example, she continued. They watched me shoved into a car because I dared to tell him to back down. Lewis documented each account carefully. Reed's arrest was the flashpoint, but it was far from the worst harm Cole had caused. This was a career built on weaponized prejudice. Back at the municipal department, Chief Carter was realizing the problem didn't stop with Cole. The FBI wanted every file connected to him and every signature that had ever greenlit his transfers or performance reviews. During her formal interview, Lewis didn't waste time. Chief Carter, how did Officer Cole remain on duty after repeated allegations of racial profiling and excessive force? Carter shifted in her seat. Agent, I inherited Cole 2 years ago. His record showed strong arrest numbers and decent evaluations. No one flagged him as a serious problem. Lewis glanced at his notes. Those strong numbers included a wildly disproportionate number of arrests of black residents, many of which prosecutors dismissed or quietly settled. Did you ever review quality or only quantity? The question cut to the heart of a bigger issue. Departments measuring success by arrest counts instead of actual safety, rewarding aggressive officers who stacked bodies instead of building trust. I trusted the internal review systems already in place, Carter said quietly. If prior chiefs or supervisors spotted serious problems, I assumed they'd handled them appropriately. Lewis made a note that would later anchor recommendations for federal oversight. The record shows those systems failed repeatedly, Chief. Cole wasn't one department's mistake. He was three departments' shared responsibility. Internal emails unearthed by the FBI revealed candid conversations among supervisors about Cole's aggressive style, his tendency to escalate minor situations, and his issues with black residents, discussed, then conveniently filed away. At County Metro, former Supervisor Sergeant Victor Delgado initially painted Cole as a hard charger with no major issues. Under questioning, that story didn't survive contact with documented reality. Look, we all knew Cole had a problem with black suspects, Delgado finally admitted on record. But he was skilled at writing reports that justified everything. Discipline meant headaches, paperwork, potential lawsuits. It was easier, he said, to nudge him toward another agency and let them deal with it. That one sentence perfectly summarized the institutional cowardice Lewis had spent his career fighting. The FBI also uncovered psychological evaluations from early in Cole's career, assessments that flagged troubling attitudes about minorities and authority. Warnings ignored by departments eager to fill vacancies. Psychologist Dr. Ellen Park, who evaluated Cole in 2017, spoke openly with investigators. My report was clear, she said. He showed elevated hostility toward minority communities and an inflated, rigid sense of his own authority. I recommended intensive training and strict supervision, she added. Instead, they hired him as if there were no concerns at all. Her professional warnings had been treated like optional footnotes. The more Lewis and Martinez uncovered, the clearer it became. Cole didn't become dangerous in a vacuum. He'd been shaped, shielded, and empowered by the very institutions meant to restrain people like him. Meanwhile, evidence from Reed's arrest revealed new angles. Martinez flagged something in Cole's phone logs. Lewis, check this out. Right after the arrest, he made several calls. One to contact listed as Brotherhood Mark. Lewis felt his stomach tighten. Do we know who that is? We're still tracing it, Martinez said. Preliminary intel links that number to a man associated with a white nationalist group that's been trying to infiltrate law enforcement. If confirmed, that connection would shift Cole's case from individual bigotry into the realm of organized extremism, domestic terrorism wearing a badge with all the legal firepower that implied. The expanding investigation turned Reed's arrest into a portal, exposing systemic rot that reached far beyond a single coffee shop, a single patrol car, or a single town. For Lewis, the mission was now twofold: hold Cole personally accountable and force institutions to confront the structures that had nurtured his worst impulses for nearly a decade. The DOJ greenlit an expanded probe, and soon the case had its own task force, dedicated prosecutors, and instructions from Washington to go wherever the evidence leads, no matter how uncomfortable. While agents built the criminal case, a different kind of preparation was happening in Washington. At the Pentagon, public affairs worked urgently on coordinated messaging for what they knew would be a critical moment. The briefing room had hosted countless press conferences, but few carried the emotional and political weight of the one Lieutenant General Marcus Reed was about to lead. Admiral Lisa Monroe, Director of Public Affairs, had spent the morning on calls with the White House, congressional leaders, veteran groups, and base commanders. Every word would echo far beyond the Beltway. General Reed, Monroe said quietly backstage, interest in this story is off the charts. Every major network is live. Foreign press, veteran outlets, online platforms. They're all here. Your statement will be carried worldwide. Reed adjusted the same dress blues that had sparked his arrest just 2 days earlier. The visual irony wasn't lost on him. He felt its weight with each breath. That uniform had once marked him as a target in a small coffee shop. Now it marked him as the face of a broader fight over respect, race, and the meaning of service. Admiral, I understand how big this is, Reed said. But I don't just want to talk about myself. This has to be about civil rights, about accountability, about every service member. The packed briefing room hummed with tension. Seasoned Pentagon reporters sat shoulder to shoulder with civil rights journalists, veteran correspondents, and international media looking to frame America's latest reckoning. When Reed stepped to the podium, cameras clicked in rapid bursts. He scanned the room slowly, then gripped the edges of the lectern with hands that were steady but not indifferent. Good afternoon, he began. I am Lieutenant General Marcus Reed, United States Army. On Tuesday afternoon, I was arrested by a local police officer while wearing this uniform, buying coffee. He claimed I was impersonating a military officer. He insisted my uniform and credentials were fraudulent. The room went silent, every microphone tilted forward, every lens locked. Let me be crystal clear, Reed continued. My uniform is real. It represents over 3 decades of service, including multiple combat deployments. Every medal on this jacket was earned, not purchased. My identification is issued by the Department of Defense and verifiable in seconds. What happened Tuesday was not an honest mistake or a paperwork mix-up. It was a deliberate choice to see a black man in a decorated uniform and assume fraud. It was an attack on me, on my service, and on every person who's worn this country's cloth. Hands shot up. General, one reporter called. Critics say this incident is being exaggerated for political reasons. How do you respond? Anyone who thinks this is exaggerated, Reed replied, doesn't understand the stakes. When police can arrest military personnel based on prejudice, they undermine the very institution that defends their right to wear a badge. A Pentagon correspondent spoke next. What should happen to Officer Cole? He should face the full force of federal law, Reed answered. But this is bigger than one officer. We need systemic changes to ensure no service member, of any race or rank, faces this again. As the press conference rolled on, it became clear Reed wasn't angling for personal vindication. He was standing in for every soldier stared at suspiciously, every veteran disrespected in the uniform they'd bled to wear. On bases worldwide, troops watched from day rooms and barracks. At Fort Liberty, Major Jennifer Morales gathered her company around a TV. Pay attention, she told them. You're watching one of our own defend all of us. At Quantico, retired Marine Colonel Alan Park, the same elder Marine who'd challenged Cole in the cafe, watched alongside younger Marines, pride evident as Reed spoke about duty, dignity, and consequences. That's what leadership looks like, Park said quietly. And that's what it looks like when the system actually backs us up. Veteran organizations responded with remarkable speed and unity. Within hours, statements of support poured out from groups representing millions of former service members. Veterans of Foreign Wars National Commander Linda Graves issued a blistering declaration. The arrest of General Reed is an attack on every American who has worn the uniform. We will not tolerate such disrespect. The American Legion announced a nationwide Stand with Reed Day, urging posts across the country to host forums on police interactions with veterans and the need for stronger protections. Iraq and Afghanistan Veterans of America launched a letter-writing blitz targeting Congress, demanding hearings on policing standards, military respect, and racial bias within law enforcement. Active duty troops added their voices online. Social feeds filled with service members sharing their own stories of skepticism, harassment, or disbelief when they wore the uniform outside base gates. Staff Sergeant Maria Delgado, stationed in Italy, posted a video that went viral overnight. I've deployed 3 times, she said. But when I wear my uniform home, people act like I'm playing dress-up because I'm Latina. General Reed is speaking for all of us who've had our service questioned because of our skin color, she added. That's why this matters. Navy Chief Petty Officer Andre Miller shared his own experience. I've been stopped in uniform twice because officers thought I was faking it, he said. Both times, my CO had to confirm I'm real. This isn't one rogue cop. This is a system that refuses to believe certain people belong in uniform. His words echoed across veteran forums and group chats. Cable networks devoted entire segments to the unfolding saga. Legal analysts, retired generals, civil rights leaders, and former cops all weighed in, sometimes clashing, sometimes aligning in unexpected ways. One primetime host tried to downplay the incident as overzealous policing, suggesting Reed's arrest might be understandable confusion. The backlash from veteran viewers was immediate and fierce. Within hours, the network walked the comments back, airing a segment featuring only veterans and active duty personnel explaining why, no, this was not reasonable, and no, they would not forget it. On another network, a full hour was dedicated to the broader question: if this can happen to a three-star general, what's happening to everyone else who can't call the Pentagon? Congress moved faster than usual. Senator Marcus Hill, chair of the Senate Armed Services Committee, announced hearings on police training and interaction with military personnel, particularly service members of color. Our constitutional duty to provide for the common defense includes protecting those who defend us, Hill said. That means ensuring they're not treated as criminals for wearing their uniforms. In the House, Representative Diane Carter, a former Army captain, introduced the Military Service Protection Act, legislation making it a federal offense to arrest service members based on racial profiling or baseless suspicion of impersonation. No one should have to prove they earned the right to wear their own uniform, Carter said, especially not to someone with less training, less responsibility, and less accountability. Internationally, allies watched closely. European outlets framed the story as part of America's ongoing struggle with race and policing, while adversarial states seized on it for propaganda. State media in rival nations highlighted the incident as evidence of hypocrisy, America preaching freedom abroad while struggling with prejudice at home. But the subsequent accountability complicated that narrative. For military families, the incident cut particularly deep. They knew the cost of service better than anyone, and they wanted proof that their sacrifices wouldn't be met with handcuffs and suspicion. Reed's wife, Lena, agreed to a rare interview. When someone humiliates my husband for wearing his uniform, they're not just attacking him, she said. They're attacking every family who's waded through deployments and funerals. We live with the risks. We accept them. What we won't accept is being treated like criminals for the very service we've given this country. The story sparked change across police departments. Some agencies scrambled to roll out new training modules on military recognition, identification verification, and respectful interaction with service members. The International Association of Chiefs of Police released guidelines urging departments to create clear policies for verifying credentials before making arrests involving people in uniform. Several departments announced new rules. Any arrest of a person in military dress would require a supervisor's direct approval after credential checks with military authorities. But many advocates said these steps, while welcome, barely scratched the surface. Training alone wouldn't fix systems that rewarded aggressive bias and shrugged at accountability. Reed watched the evolving debate with measured hope and sober realism. He was grateful for the momentum, but knew momentum faded unless turned into structures, laws, and enforced standards. The real test, he knew, would come not in this week's headlines, but in whether reforms survived once cameras moved on and outrage cooled into complacency. While the public conversation swelled, the more technical gears of justice kept grinding. In a packed federal courthouse, U.S. Attorney Monica Reyes stepped to a podium, indictment in hand. Today, she announced, we are filing federal charges against former Officer Darren Cole for multiple civil rights violations under color of law, conspiracy to deprive citizens of constitutional rights, and hate crime offenses. The indictment represented 6 months of relentless investigation, interviews, subpoenas, data pulls, and told a grim story that stretched far beyond one general and one afternoon. The evidence shows a pattern of behavior, Reyes continued, that cannot be dismissed as isolated errors. Cole systematically targeted black citizens, abusing his authority to harass, intimidate, and unlawfully arrest. Inside a federal holding facility, Cole struggled to process just how badly his life had imploded. What he still insisted was good policing had somehow turned into 47 federal counts. His court-appointed attorney, Daniel Lopez, went over the charges again. Mr. Cole, you're facing 47 separate counts tied to 16 victims over 7 years. If convicted, you could die in prison. Cole let out a harsh, bitter laugh. All because I arrested some guy pretending to be a general, he muttered. This is insane. I did my job. Lopez had defended plenty of people in denial, but Cole's grip on his own fiction was something else entirely. Marcus Reed is a confirmed lieutenant general, the lawyer said. Not a fake. You weren't punished for catching a fraud, Lopez added. You're here because the government has proof you spent years violating civil rights under the cover of a badge. Prosecutor David Chen, leading the federal case, understood its symbolic weight. This trial would signal to the entire country whether federal law truly reached officers who weaponized prejudice. We have recorded calls between Cole and known white nationalist contacts, Chen told his team. We have texts where he talks about cleaning up neighborhoods by locking up black residents on site. We also have years of arrest data that can't be explained by anything except deliberate racial targeting, he said. This isn't messy policing. This is organized racial terror under color of law. Before the grand jury, victims like Dr. Price and Angela Ruiz detailed how Cole's actions echoed long after the handcuffs were removed, destroyed reputations, lost careers, ongoing anxiety, and fear. After that night, my colleagues watched me differently, Dr. Price testified. Some patients refused to see me. They'd seen the footage of me in cuffs and assumed the worst. Ruiz explained how she ended up leaving teaching entirely. Parents stopped trusting me. Students were scared. The arrest wasn't just a moment, it rewrote my entire standing in the community. Former Supervisor Delgado's testimony was perhaps the most damning. Granted immunity, he admitted departments had knowingly passed Cole along, treating him as someone else's problem rather than a danger to the public. We didn't want lawsuits, he said. We didn't want protests. We just wanted the headache gone. So we helped him find another job instead of dealing with the damage he caused. Plea negotiations went nowhere. With pressure from the DOJ and the Pentagon, prosecutors refused to bargain away a case this visible and this deeply rooted in systemic failure. The United States does not negotiate with domestic terrorists, Mr. Lopez, Chen said during one meeting. Your client terrorized citizens under the authority of the government. This belongs in open court. As trial approached, Cole's life disintegrated. His wife filed for divorce, taking their kids to another state. Their accounts were tied up in asset reviews. The union pulled its promised support. Union President Harold Bryant issued a statement. We cannot condone actions that so clearly betray our oath and values. Officer Cole acted outside everything this profession stands for. Several former colleagues, facing their own potential exposure, agreed to testify. They spoke about racist comments, targeted patrol patterns, and Cole's open bragging about putting people in their place. Officer Kelly Tran, the rookie who'd urged credential verification that day in the station, testified about conversations where Cole called black residents natural criminals who needed constant pressure. He said arresting black men in white neighborhoods was how you kept standards up, Tran told the jury. He thought that was funny. He thought that was good policing. The trial opened to overflow crowds and wall-to-wall coverage. Chen's opening statement laid out the case with brutal clarity. This was not about one botched arrest. It was about a campaign of racial oppression. Ladies and gentlemen, he told the jury, Robert Darren Cole was sworn to protect every citizen. Instead, he hunted some of them. He turned law enforcement into a weapon against black Americans. The prosecution's evidence was dense and damning. Recorded calls, racist texts, an unmistakable pattern in arrest data, and a long line of victims whose stories fit together like pieces of one horrifying puzzle. Reed took the stand on the third day. His calm, precise testimony left little room for doubt. He described the coffee shop, The ID check, the refusal to verify, the cuffs, the humiliation. There was no reasonable cause to suspect me of a crime, he said. The only thing that made me suspicious in Cole's eyes was the color of my skin in this uniform. The jury deliberated less than 4 hours before returning, guilty on all 47 counts. Cole stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, as each verdict landed like another locked door. Sentencing came weeks later. The courthouse was again packed. This time, anticipation focused on what message the penalty would send to victims, to law enforcement, and to the country watching. Judge Rebecca Allen's voice was firm. She spoke of shattered trust, stolen dignity, and a decade of terror inflicted under a government shield. Then she handed down a life sentence plus decades more. Cole left the courtroom in chains, his badge long gone, his power stripped away. Outside, reforms were already reshaping departments, laws, and training, proof that one abuse of authority had unleashed a reckoning America could no longer avoid. Lesson 1. When respect meets prejudice. Mamurers. For those of you who have watched America change over the last 6 or 7 decades, the sight of a man in full dress uniform still means something. You remember watching young soldiers ship off to Vietnam, seeing Desert Storm on the evening news, hearing about Iraq and Afghanistan while folding laundry or making dinner. You know what those ribbons cost in blood, bone, and sleepless nights. So imagine, just for a moment, being Lieutenant General Marcus Reed. 3 stars on your shoulders, decades of combat and command behind you, walking into a quiet coffee shop just hoping for a hot black coffee and 10 minutes of peace. Instead of respect, you're met with suspicion. Instead of thank you for your service, you're told in so many words, you don't belong in that uniform. That's the first hard lesson. No matter how high you rise or how much you give, prejudice can still look you in the eye and call you a liar. For older Americans who remember segregated lunch counters and whites-only signs, this is a bitter echo. We want to believe we're past that. Reed's story forces us to confront the truth. Progress is real, but it is not complete. And respect, even for those who bled for the flag, is far more fragile than it should be. Lesson 2. One bad cop is never just one bad cop. Many of you grew up in towns where you knew the local beat cop by name. Maybe you had coffee with him at the diner or watched him direct traffic after a storm knocked the lights out. You also know there have always been officers who wore the badge for the wrong reasons. Officer Darren Cole wasn't born in that coffee shop. He was built over years by departments that looked the other way, by supervisors who signed off on transfers instead of discipline, by internal reviews that chose quiet over justice. When the FBI dug into his history, they didn't find one overreaction. They found a trail. Black professionals arrested outside their workplaces, a teacher hauled off in front of her students, citizens treated like criminals simply for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. The uncomfortable lesson for those of us who remember just trusting the system is this. Systems can protect the wrong people if we let them. Cole was passed from department to department like a problem no one wanted to own. It took a 3-star general in handcuffs to finally force the truth into the light. For older Americans, that may feel familiar, like the priests no one questioned, the factory bosses no one challenged, the good old boys everyone knew were trouble but no one stopped. This story reminds us that evil doesn't always roar. Sometimes it just keeps being quietly reassigned. Lesson 3. Accountability can still happen if we demand it. If you're over 65, you've seen enough broken promises to fill a file cabinet. Commissions formed after a scandal, blue ribbon panels, solemn speeches, and then life goes back to the way it was. That's why what happened after Reed's arrest matters so much. The Pentagon didn't shrug this off. The FBI didn't pat anyone on the head and say, try harder next time. Federal agents walked into that small station, uncuffed a general, and then started pulling on every loose thread they could find. Old complaints were reopened. Former victims were called. Officers and chiefs who had quietly shuffled Cole along found themselves answering hard questions under oath. And when the evidence was laid out, a jury of ordinary citizens said, "Enough." They didn't just find him guilty for one terrible afternoon in a coffee shop. They convicted him for years of abuse under color of law. The judge didn't hand down a slap on the wrist. She handed down a sentence that said, in clear terms, "Never again, not like this." For older Americans who have watched powerful people walk away from their sins time and time again, that matters. It reminds us that accountability is still possible if the public pays attention, if institutions feel pressure, if we refuse to look away because we're tired or cynical. Reed's dignity, the courage of people like that old Marine in the cafe and the young rookie at the station, and the determination of federal investigators together turned one man's humiliation into a turning point. Conclusion: the legacy you helped decide. If you're 65 or older, your life has already helped write chapters of America's story through your votes, your work, your parenting, your prayers. The question now is what kind of country you want to leave behind. Reed will heal. His record and his honor are intact. But the deeper issue is what happens to the next young black lieutenant or the next veteran in a wheelchair at the grocery store when someone with a badge decides they don't look like they belong. The lesson from this story is not just that justice can fail, it's that justice can still fight back, but only if we insist on it. You have lived through marches, wars, recessions, and reckonings. Your voice still matters. Your stories still matter. And your expectations of police, of politicians, of the military, of your neighbors, still shape what this nation becomes. America is not finished, and neither, my friend, are you. Friends, after hearing General Reed's story, I'd love to know what you think. If a three-star general in full uniform can be handcuffed and humiliated in public, what does that mean for everyday veterans, working folks, and young people just trying to live their lives? Have you ever seen something like this? Or lived through your own moment of unfair suspicion or disrespect? How did it change the way you see our justice system? Share your thoughts in the comments, tap like, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss more real stories and hard-earned lessons.